Okay, so today we're going to learn about numbers. Numbers also is not a common book that people read. So how familiar are you with numbers? Well, is that a common books that you actually hear in your sermons or Bible teaching about numbers? Yeah, numbers is not a common books that people reference or preach about, or is not a common books that they use to teach in a Bible study and whatnot. So, just like Leviticus is sort of like abandoned book. It's like nobody reads, nobody teaches, nobody has interest. So, Numbers one is not as bad as Leviticus, but it's almost the same as the rest of the book. I mean, it just people really don't pay attention. So, what's so important about Numbers? So they have a very little knowledge about numbers. So then, as far as we can remember, numbers, when you actually hear the title number, what comes to your mind? When you think of the book Numbers, what comes to your mind? Moses? Okay. Anyone else? You can think of anything? No? Nothing comes to your mind other than Moses? What do you know about numbers? Just tell me what you know about numbers that you can remember. Okay. Any stories that you know in numbers? So nothing really comes to your mind, or nothing you can just like remember. So like very little stuff that you can kind of remember. You know about numbers. So just to give you a little bit of a background, what numbers is. Well, because the title of this book is Numbers, it's about numbering something, right? So, how much do you know about different types of Bible? I mean, we read English Bible here, yeah? And what type of Bibles are available out there? Well, we know there's an NIV version, NRSV, there's an NLP, ESV, there's all different types of Bible. Are they all the same? different. So how did this Bible actually came to a Bible that we know today? Okay. So then, is there an original version of the Bible? The real original Bible? I mean, the original Bible. Yeah, the original scripture, yeah. Do we have that? Some, it might be in, we don't know exactly why, we don't know exactly where, but somewhere in, museum somewhere in the world. Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah. So wow. Types of Bibles that we know. I mean, we read this Bible and then we believe that it is truth and we came from somewhere. But where did it come from? And where is the original version of the scripture? Well, I'm sorry that I'm asking all this weird question all the time, but but this is something to think about. Well, there is no such thing as original Bible, neither Old Testament or New Testament. There is no original Bible exists. The real original Bible. So then, what do we actually have? What do we have? What we have is the copies of the original Bible. We don't have neither Old Testament or the New Testament. There is no such thing as original Bible exists. So we have a copies of the copies of the copies. So then, if you just keep copying, so back then, obviously, in Old Testament days, there's no copier. There's no printing. So then how do they make copy of the Bible? Right, you heard in the New Testament, there's a Pharisees, there's scribers, there's whatchamacall, I just don't remember the types of people. But those people that always challenged Jesus in the New Testament. Right? Out of those groups of people, there is a group of people called a scriber. Who are they? Scriber is the one who actually copies the Bible by hand. So what they do is they write the Bible. That's their job. And that's all they do. They copies of the Bible. Because they copies the Bible from word by word from the Old Testament, they know the Bible the most. Because they copies it. So there's a copies of the copies of the copies. So if the process of copying the Bible is by hand and by human, do you think there is going to be a mistake? there's going to be a mistake, right? There's always a chance that they make mistakes. So then, many of the people, whatever we read in this Bible is perfect. And every word is accurate. Is it true? Possibly not. So we believe this is the truth, and this is this is what we have to believe. But there are parts of the Bible that are not 100% accurate, because we're only reading, we have the translations of the copies of the copies of the copies of the Bible. Okay? So a lot of people had questions about, is that perfect? Is this Bible that we're reading is perfect? The answer is, it's not perfect. So then there is a multiple different types of Bible that exist at the time. Old Testament was written in Hebrew. New Testament was written in Greek. But as the generation goes by, based on the history that I told you many times, because the Judah was completely torn down by the Babylonians, and Babylonian ruled for a while, and Babylonian Empire was taken down by Persians, and Persian was also taken down by the Greek, the Alexander the Great, and then later on the Roman Empire took over the Greek Empire. So history goes on. But at the time of the ruling of Roman Empire, what Alexander the Great did was, not only he conquered the world, but also he was one of the person who brought all the Greek philosophy and Greek cultures to the country that he started to rule. So he brought all this, Greek cultures and philosophies and all the stuff that his country used and teaches to those people. So at the time of the ruling of the Greek, everybody wanted to learn about Greek cultures, Greek language, Greek philosophy, Greek literatures, Greek mythologies. They learned everything about Greek. Even after Romans took over the Greek, that continued to stay. So even today, you probably heard of Hellenism. Hellenism still exists until today, right? Is still we use and we still learn and we still talk about. And within our culture, Hellenism is kind of like, it dissolved in our own culture we live in. We cannot completely separate from Hellenism. So that's how much that everyone at the time admired the Greek cultures or language. So everybody used it. As much as today, what is the most commonly language used in this world? Yeah, English is the most common language, the most standard language that are used in this world. A lot of people learning English, right? Whether their own country uses English or not, doesn't really matter. It is the most commonly used language in the world. So back then, in the ancient days, when Greek was ruling and the Roman was ruling, everybody kind of like emerged into Greek cultures and Greek language and Greek literature and Greek philosophy. And everybody just started to use the Greek language. They changed your name to be Greek, right? They talk about, math, philosophies, or science, whatever it may be, they admired it so much. Because of that, even oldest Israelites, their new generations, started to use their name as, Greek names. They started to talk in Greek. So everybody, whoever talks Greek, everyone treated it there like high class. If you speak in Aramean, you're like low class. Or if you use the Hebrew, you're low class. You have to speak in Greek to be like treated well. When you have a Greek name, people will see you differently. Because of that, many people followed the Greek culture. Even Israelites started to lose the interest of their own language because the new generations start to use the Greek language. So they could not read and understand the Bible that was written in Hebrews because they don't know how to read, they don't know how to interpret it. Just like people, who immigrated from different country, right? And then their parents have started to settle into this country in here, and then, 2 generations goes by, people forget about their parents' language, right? So when you actually try to read your parents' language, you can't read, right? You don't understand, right? The same thing happened back then. So Israelites started to think, we're going to lose our Bible, our God's teaching to this new generations. So they felt there is a need to actually translate the Bible into Greek so that everyone, the new generations, could understand and read. So what they did was they actually translated the Bible from Hebrew into Greek. Have you ever heard of a Bible Septuagint? Yeah, you probably heard of the Septuagint. What is it? What does that mean by Septuagint? All right. You have heard of look like a LXX. Do you know what LXX means? Yeah. What is L? 50. X. 10. Another X. So then 50 plus 10 plus 10. That's a 70. Right? Right? So, then, how did this 70 come from? So what they did was, from each tribe of Israel, right? They picked 6 people of each from the tribe. And then, each person went in, they started to translate the Hebrew into Greek. Literally, there's 72 people were there to translate the Hebrew into Greek. That's how it came about Septuagint. It's precisely 72 people, but we call it Septuagint, which is a 70. And Septuagint was the most commonly used in early days. When you actually read in the New Testament, most of the Old Testament's the reference in New Testament, the Old Testament is a reference in New Testament that you know here, it was extracted from the Septuagint. So when you actually look at the verse, when you actually look at the Old Testament that is written here, you see there's a differences. Just a little bit differences. Nuance is very different. Because they reference the Septuagint rather than an actual Hebrew Old Testament Bible. And when Jesus was referenced the Old Testament, he also used the Septuagint. So Septuagint in Jesus' time was the most commonly used Bible. And there are multiple different types of Bible. You probably heard of a Masoretic Bible. You probably heard about it, right? Masoretic is more the Hebrew. It's never been translated. That is actually a Masoretic is the Hebrew version of the Bible. And when you actually read, I don't know if you ever going to learn the Hebrew, ever, but if you look at the Hebrew characters, you will see there's like dots or like line below the alphabet of the Hebrew alphabet. It looks weird. Okay? So let me show you some Hebrew words. Let's see if I can share my screen. Do you see my screen? Do you see it still? Okay, so when you look at this, this is the Hebrew words. You see this like line, and there's like dots in here, like there's like weird things are at the bottom or the top. You see this, the weird thing over here? Yeah. So these are the vowel. Okay? Without those dots and the lines that you see at the bottom and the top, right? So everything else, the big characters that you see, right? Those are consonant. So these are all consonant, and this is a vowel. So without this dot, everything is consonant. So can you imagine reading a word without vowel? Only reading in consonant? Can you read that? So Hebrew word does not have a vowel at all. Okay? So the people who actually developed the Masoretic Bible, because they could not understand, the Israelite themselves understand, but new generations does not understand. So what they did was they added a vowel so people can read easily. So this dots and the lines does not exist in all the Hebrew text. You won't find any of these. You will only see the consonant. You don't see this dots and lines. People, the Jewish people, still, they can read without this vowel. I cannot read the Hebrews without vowel, but the Jewish people could read this only with the consonant. And they know exactly what it means and how to read. So Masoretic, they started to actually put the dots and lines to actually made the Hebrew words a little more readable and understandable, which is a Hebrew text version of the Bible. You probably heard about Vulgate. Have you ever heard of a Vulgate? Vulgate. It's the Latin version of the Bible. So this is also translated into Latin. Vulgate is Hebrew version of the Old Bible was translated to Latin. Okay? So of course there are a lot of other different type of Bible exist, but those are the three most commonly heard: Masoretic, Vulgate, and there's the Septuagint. Those are the three most common things you hear about. And then there's a different types of translations came out of it, meaning one is more paraphrased version of the Bible, or literal translation of the Bible, depending upon what method they used. So they came about different translated version of the Bible that we use. So King James is word-by-word translation. Like NASB, ESV is more of word-by-word translation. They don't paraphrase. But NIV, they paraphrased. So there's a difference. So when you read the one Bible versus another Bible, you will see there's a little bit difference the way it was interpreted or whether it was translated. Okay? So, why am I actually explaining all this difference between the Bibles and history of the origin of the Bibles and whatnot? So what does this number came about? Now, can you read this? Who can read this? This is Greek. This is not Hebrew. It reads arithmoi. Arithmoi means number. Okay? So in the translation version of the Bible called the Septuagint, I told you that it is translated from Hebrew to Greek. So as they were translating, they actually named the book, and each of the book put a title. And the Greek version of the Bible, which is the Septuagint, this particular book that we're going to learn, is they titled as arithmoi, which is number. So they literally translated whatever it was using Septuagint into English. And arithmoi, it was a number, so we called it numbers. But in the original text of the Hebrew Bible, this book is not numbers. In Hebrew word, as you can see here on the top here, I don't know if you can read the Hebrew. So, top here, right? This is Ba Midbar. Ba Midbar. Ba Midbar means in the wilderness. So, literally, this is the very first chapter 1. We'll read Numbers chapter 1, verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt. Right? When the word that you actually see over here is the very first word of this book. So, Va'ikra, this is a word by word, a literal translation. Va'ikra means, and spoke. Yehovah, the Lord. El, Moshe, unto Moses, Ba Midbar. So, in the wilderness. So you can see here, Hebrew words read from the right to left, not to left to right. Okay? Vaikra, he spoke, and he spoke. Yehovah, the Lord. El Moshe, to Moshe, Ba Midbar. Where? In the wilderness. So this book title in Hebrew is Ba Midbar, which means the title of this book is In the Wilderness. So the numbers that we know in this book title is different than Hebrew version. Most of the Hebrew version of the title of the book is not the way we read. So I just want to spell it out where this number, the title of this book number came about. I just wanted to just give you a little bit of a history. It took a little longer than it needed, but I just wanted to explain to you where this book title came about. So learning this little history, it is not critically important, but it just helps. All right. Now, so when we think about numbers, we think about, something was number. But is this book important about numbering? Of course, when you read this book, Numbers, you will see there is they do census. They count the number of the people before they actually, right after they left Egypt, they counted all the people. And at the end, they recount those people. So they count them twice. But is that the most important part of this book? Maybe not. What's really important is what happened in the desert. What happened in the desert is really what's important. So in this book, we're going to learn about how God trained. It's like a boot camp. It's training camp before they go into the real battle. So, for example, when you actually join the service, right, you don't dispatch to a battlefield right away, right? You have to go through the boot camp. You have to get the initial training. Once you get the initial training, and then you assign to wherever they belong. Then from there, they continue to have more training before they assign to a real battlefield. Before Israelites move into the promised land, which is a Canaan, God trained the Israelites in this wilderness for 40 years. But what's important is this book, the Numbers, talks about what really happened in the Old Testament. Not Old Testament. In the journey of the Israelites. So Exodus talks about how they left the Egypt and how God delivered them from Egypt to the wilderness. All right? So he talks about a lot of story about how God moved them. So he talks about some of the journey of the Israelites. Leviticus, on the other hand, does not talk about what they did in the wilderness. He talked about God's law, which what Moses heard from God when he went up to the mountain of Sinai. For 40 days and 40 nights, what he heard and how he came down. So he talks about everything what he heard about God's law and what God told Moses is written. Numbers, the continuation from the Exodus, it is continued to talk about their life of wilderness. But what's interesting is when you read the very first chapter here, so it says the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. So where are they now? They're where they are is in the wilderness of Sinai. Okay? So, in the tent of meeting, on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they had to come out of the land of Egypt. Okay? So when is this? How long they been there in the wilderness at this time? So, the second year, right? And the second month on the first day. And they're in wilderness of Sinai. What happened in the second year after they came out of Egypt? Do you know? First census, yeah? Well, let's just go back. Exodus. We're going to go towards the end of the Exodus. We're going to go to chapter 40. Exodus chapter 40. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month you shall erect the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. When? So, first day of the first month, right? And verse 17. In the first month, in the second year, on the first day of the month, the tabernacle was erected. Okay? Correct. Right after they finished building tabernacle, and the second month, God told them to count those people. So is that the beginning of the journey, or is it the middle of the journey, or is it at the end of the journey? When is this? Is it the end? Middle? All right. How long did they stay in wilderness? So they stayed in the wilderness for 40 years. And how many years they into this? Did you say like middle of it or end of it? I mean, where did you come up with that idea? We all know. All right, I'm not asking you a very difficult question here, okay? I'm not, tricking you or anything like that. Like, that's supposed to be like no-brainer, man. All right. So this is the beginning of the journey, okay? Very beginning of the journey. They came out, and then, so let's take a look at how they moved, okay? Let's see if I can actually show this map again. You see the map? Okay. So, just take a look. So this is where they left, right? Ramses. They moved to Sukkot, and they crossed the Red Sea. So, how many wilderness did they pass? Most people only know the Sinai. That's all they know. They don't know anything else. It's just Sinai. But they crossed the multiple wilderness. They crossed, it's not, so here, the wilderness of Shur, that's the first wilderness they passed. And they went to wilderness of Etham, and then they moved to wilderness of Shin, and then they moved over to Sinai. They moved over to Paran. They moved over to wilderness of Zin. So how many wilderness did they have passed? One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. I just told you this. Is that me actually like making you guys like confused or like traumatized? Like, what is this? All right. I must not be a good teacher. All right. So they passed the multiple different wilderness: the Shur, Etham, and Sin, and Sinai, and Paran, and Zin. So when you actually go to, let's turn to Numbers. Let's go to, let's see. One second. Towards the end of it. So chapter 33. When you look at the chapter 33, it's just to show the journey, how they where they left, where they passed. So the diagram that you see is based out of this chapter 33. So when you look at the verse 8, they're passing the wilderness of Etham, right? And then verse 11, they go through Shin. Verse 15, they go through Sinai, right? As you can see, it shows where they passed and how they got to where they are. Okay? All right. So they passed a multiple different path. But how long did it take for them to get to Mount Sinai? How long did it take for them to get to Sinai? Well, obviously, only some of you actually studied the Exodus with me, so most of you probably didn't even learn all this stuff that I, explained, obviously. 40 years? I must be really scaring you a lot. All right, guys. I don't know. Is that me? I'm not sure what it is. Okay, Okay, so let's get to first chapter of Numbers again. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt. All right. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 19. This is how much we know about Old Testament, by the way. Yeah. Exodus chapter 19. On the third new moon after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on the day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. How long? On the third new moon after the people of Israel. So, when did they leave? The Egypt? I feel like I'm tricking you guys, or when did they leave Egypt? All right, listen. Okay, listen. When is the Passover? Passover is the first month of the 14th day. Right? And right after Passover, they left. Right? So when did they leave? Correct. The first month, on the 15th day, they left. Right? And then, they're on the third month now. How long did it take? Let's start again. Very first month, 14th day, was the Passover. 15th, they left the Egypt. Now they're on the third month. Okay, let's do this. Let's go back to preschool days. All right. Okay. Second month to the third month. How many months? Okay. From Month and a half to the 2 months, how long? Okay, so then month and a half to the third month? month and a month? No, month and a half. January 15th they left. They're now on to the third month, which is the beginning of March. How long did it take? I get it now that you're not strong with math. Okay, I get it now. Okay, but we're not doing any complicated math here. Okay, we're not even doing the algebra here. Okay, we're doing just like, just pluses. That's it, right? Addition. That's all we're doing. Month and a half from the first month of the 15th, the beginning of the March. It takes about a month and a half. Okay. When they reached at the Mount Sinai, right, God called him up to Mount Sinai. So he went up. How long did he stay? He stayed 40 days and 40 nights, right? And he actually received the stone tablet with all the God's commands. And when he came down, what happened? When he came down, what happened? What big mess? For what? Yeah, Aaron made the golden calf. The people were worshiping their golden calf. So God was extremely mad. Moses was mad, right? And Moses just threw that 2-stone tablet. It just completely destroyed it, right? And then he ordered to kill each other, and he just completely destroyed this this golden calf and grind it and made him to drink with it, right? And then, what did Moses do? So then he went up to the mountain again, right? For how long? So he'd stay there another 40 days and 40 nights. So then, let's count it. How long did he spend? Now, when you think about 40 days and 40 nights, it was up in the mountain, and he came down, and that mess was there, right? So he went up to another 40 days and 40 nights. So the time that he spent on the mountain of Sinai, so a minimum of 80 days. So if it's 80 days, how many months? Okay? So he arrived on the third month, but he spent 40 days, another 40 days, so 80 days, and we don't know how long he stayed at the after he came down from the mountain, we don't know exactly how long he stayed, but he went up to another 40 days and 40 nights right after that, right? So then, after he came down, what did he do? When we go back to Exodus chapter 40, the verse that we read, verse 2, on the first day of the first month, you shall erect the tabernacle of the tent of meeting. Right? And then verse 17, in the first month of the second year, on the first day of the month, the tabernacle was erected. So how long did it take for them to build the tabernacle? But when he arrived at the mountain of Sinai, it took about a month and a half to get there, and then he spent another 3 or 4 months. He was there, and he took time to actually build the tabernacle, right? And then after that, on the second month of the first day, the God told them to count it. All this happened at the very beginning of the journey, right? Very beginning of the journey. They just came out, they just built the tabernacle, and God told them to count those people, right? So now, I want you to think about this. Why is God ordering Moses to count this people? What's the reason? Don't know? All right. Let's come back to Numbers again. Verse 2. Take a census of all the congregations of the people of Israel by clan, by father's house, according to the number of names, every male, head by head, from 20 years old and upward, all in Israel who are able to go to war, and you and Aaron shall list them, company by company, and there shall be with you a man from each tribe, each man being a head of the house of his father. Why is he counting? So, the God is ordering Moses to count the people. But the way he's counting is, he said by the verse that we just read, from 20 years old and upward, all in Israel who are able to go to war. So who is he counting? Only the men who are able to go to war. He's only counting those people. He's not counting children, he's not counting women, he's not counting elders, he's not counting any people sick. He's only counting a man aged between 20 upward who can go to war. Okay? So that means, what about the rest of the people? What about the rest of the people? They're not being counted. He's only counting people who can go to war. So let's think about this. He's counting these men who can go to war for a reason. What is he planning? He's planning to have a war. He's planning to have a war. That's why he's counting. Okay? And interestingly, when you go back to Exodus again, let's turn to Exodus chapter 6. Verse 26. These are the Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, "Bring out the people of Israel from the land of Egypt by their host." Bring out the people of Israel from the land of Egypt by their host. What does that mean by host? Yeah. What does your translation say? Army. Okay. Let me ask you this. What were they doing in Egypt? Yeah. So are there army? They're trained to be army in Egypt? What were they doing again? They're not trained to be an army in Egypt. But go back to Exodus again, now chapter 12. We're going to read from verse 37. And the people of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. A mixed multitude also went up with them, and very much livestock, both flocks and herds. And they baked unleavened cake of the dough that they had brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not wait, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. The time that the people of Israel lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, on that very day, all the host of the Lord went out of from the land of Egypt. So probably your version of the Bible says army. Right? Yes? Okay. Once again, God is calling these people what? Army or host? What army? Where's the army? First of all, do they even have a weapon? Do they know how to fight? Have they been trained? Then why is God calling them army? They're not army at all. They're not soldiers. They're not warriors. They're just slaves. They'll probably be building pyramid or building some things. They're not trained to be a warrior at all. But God calls them army. They're not warrior. They're not army. But God calls them army. And God only counts the people 20 and upward who can go to war. These people are not trained to go to war at all. But He's counting. Let me tell you, in order for us to fight, you have to become a warrior, you have to become a soldier, you have to be trained to fight. But interestingly, when the Israelites, when they had a fight, what happened with the fight? When they were fighting with the Amalekites, what happened with them? How did they fight? The very first fight that they had was with Amalekites. How did they fight? Do you know how did they fight? Do you remember that Moses went up on the mountainside, he was lifting up his staff? And then when his step was actually coming down because it's too difficult, it's too hard for him to just hold up. So there is Aaron and Hur was standing right next to him, so helping the Moses lift up the staff. Whenever his staff goes up, Joshua and his people winning. When his staff comes down, he loses the battle. Do you remember that battle? Then, if his staff is continuing to come down, what happens? He loses. Then, let me ask you this. If that's the case, does it have anything to do with how Joshua and his Israelites fought bravely? So what was the real reason they actually win the battle? So who's actually doing a job to win this battle? So then, if God is the one who is actually making them win, what is Joshua and the rest of the people? They're fighting with the Amalekite. If Moses' staff is the one who's actually making the war to win, then what is this people really, doing in the battlefield? So let's go to Exodus chapter 17. Exodus chapter 17. We're going to read from verse 8. Then Amalekite came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose for us a man, go out and fight with Amalekite. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalekite, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. Whenever he lowered his hands, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. Then the The Lord said to Moses, "Write this as a memorial in a book, and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and called the name of it, "The Lord is my banner," saying, "Hand upon the throne of the Lord will have a war with Amalek, and generation to generation." So, I want you to think about Joshua and his people is a fight with Amalekites, while Moses, up on the hill, it was only thing he did was to lifting up his staff. That's all he did. Whenever his staff go down, when he become weary and he loses the battle, when his staff goes up, Joshua wins. So what's really more important? How Joshua fought against the Amalekite, how bravely he fought with them, and how strategically that he planned to fight against them? How powerful Joshua and his people were versus how Moses were actually lifting up and down with his staff? Which one is more important? The staff is more important than what Joshua and his people are fighting. If that's the case, who's really fighting? God is the one who's fighting, not Joshua or his people. Not their weapon, not their strategy, not what they were doing make them win this battle. It's just what God made them to win, just by lifting up the staff. What Moses did is really determine whether they're winning or losing the battle. Right? But they had to fight. Joshua had to fight. But what determined their winning versus losing was about God, and whether Moses was lifting up or down of his staff determined whether he was winning or losing the battle. If that's the case, if that's the truth, God is actually counting these people who can go to war from age 20 and above to go to war. But is it really important for how many soldiers and how many armies are there to really fight? And God only counts those people who can go to war. Now I want you to know this. God only counts the people who can fight, who can go to war. People who cannot fight, God doesn't even count them. They're not numbered. They're not counted. God only counts the people who can fight for God, who can go to spiritual war. Are you ready for the spiritual war? Can you fight? If you can fight, it's not about how strong you are, how brave you are. It's not that. Can you stand up for God? The battle is up to God, not up to me. Winning or losing is not about me. It's how God fights for us. But are we actually going out to the war? God only counts the people who can go out and fight. And those are the people who are counted and numbered. Now I'm asking you, are you ready for fight? Can you be numbered? If you can't fight, then you're not going to be numbered. You're not going to be counted. It's not about how strong you are. It's not about how brave you are. It's not about how well you can fight. It's not about your skill. It's about trusting the Lord, that we know that God is the one who fights for us. God makes Israelites, call them army, although they're not army, they're slave. They're not army at all. They're not ready to fight at all. But God calls them army. We are army, not because we're trained to be army, but God makes us to be army. And he was about to go to war. War with who? Going back to Numbers again. He's counting, he's numbering all these people to have a fight. With who? Who was he going to fight? Which army? No. Canaanite. Exactly. Right? But this is the beginning of the journey, though. Right? This is the beginning of the journey. The second year, right? The second month. So it was the beginning of the journey. So that, is he going to fight with the Canaanite? Or is he going to fight with them 40 years later? When is he going to fight with the Canaanite? 40 years later? So how long does it take from Sinai to go to the Canaan? Yeah, how long? 40 years? That's not true. Then how? How long? All right. Let's go to Deuteronomy for a second. Deuteronomy Chapter 1, we're going to read from verse 2. It is 11 days' journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. Where is Mount of Horeb to Kadesh Barnea? Correct. Horeb, the mountain of Horeb and mountain of Sinai is the same mountain. From there to Kadesh Barnea. Where is Kadesh Barnea? So what happened at the Kadesh Barnea? So let me show you the map first. Same map that we saw. Right here. Where is the Mount Sinai? Right here. From here to here. Kadesh Barnea. So what happened at the Kadesh Barnea? Now, Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 19. Then we set out from Horeb and went through all that great and terrifying wilderness that you saw on the way to the hill country of the Amorites, as the Lord our God commanded us. And we came to Kadesh Barnea, and I said to you, you have come to the hill country of the Amorites, which the Lord our God is giving us. See, the Lord your God has set the land before you. Go up, take possession, as the Lord, the God of your father, has told you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Then all of you came near me and said, let us send men before us, that they may explore the land for us and bring us word again of the way by which we must go up and the cities into which we shall come. The thing seemed good to me, and I took 12 men from you, or 1 man from each tribe, and they turned and went up into the hill country and came to the valley of Eshcol and spied it out. And they took in their hands some of the fruit of the land and brought it down to us, and brought us word again and said, it is a good land that the Lord our God is giving us. All right, coming back. Why did they go to Kadesh Barnea? God was about to bring them into Canaan. God was planning to have a war with them, to bring them into the Canaan. And they sent the spies into the land, and they came back after 40 days and said, wow, this land is great. However, we can never go in here. The people here in this place is very strong, big. For us, before them like grasshopper. We're going to completely destroy it if we go and fight. And then God counted each day that they spied. They counted it as a 1 year. So God made them to stay in the wilderness for 40 years. Yes? What was God's plan? God was planned to bring them into the promised land. It only took how long? 11 days from Mount Sinai to Kadesh Barnea. It only 11 days. From there, God was about to bring them into the promised land, but they refused. They said, we cannot go in there. So they rejected it. God counted people to go to war against the Canaanite, but they refused to fight because they looked themselves and they said, there's no way that we're going to win this battle. We're going to be completely crushed by them. No way. 10 of the people who came and said, like, oh, no way, we're going there. And only Joshua and Caleb came back and said, why not? I saw the same thing, what they saw, but I agree with everything what they said. However, because God is with us, let's go in. But everyone, the Israelites, listened to those 10 reports and said, no way, Jose, we're not going in there. We're going to be completely destroyed by them. So God's plan was about to bring them into the promised land, but they refused to go in. They refused to go to war. Therefore, God had to bring them back into the wilderness, had them stay there for 40 years. Going back to the point that I'm trying to make. God had a plan to bring them into the promised land, but they refused to come. They refused to fight. They refused to go into a war. God had no choice. Remember I mentioned long time ago, can God do anything and everything? Yes? I said no. Then what was the answer? God can do everything and anything within His own characteristics and within His own attributes. He does not force people. Jesus Christ did die for us, all of us, and He gave us options to believe. And whoever believes in His name will be saved. But there are people who believe, there are people who doesn't believe. What can God do for those people who doesn't believe? What can God do? Nothing. Let me ask you this. What did Jesus do to those of Pharisees and scribers? What did God do with them? Correct. Exactly. So the question is, if God is really want everyone to be saved, right? So why didn't you go after them? Teach them more, so change them. You have to believe. Why didn't Jesus transform them into a new person so they can be saved? Why didn't Jesus do anything? Well, that's kind of contradicting of what we have learned, that God loves us. Right? God cannot do anything if they decide not to come. God will not go after them. God let the people to make their own choice. Whether you follow God, whether you disobey God, it is your free will to choose. So, I mentioned to you, and you probably received this kind of a prayer request in church or other places that you know. People come to you and ask for the prayer and said, please pray for my father, pray for my wife, pray for my friends, pray for my husband, pray for my children's, whoever they are. Pray so they can come to Jesus, so they can believe in Jesus. So then we said, yeah, I'm going to pray for you. Let me ask you this. Can God change their heart? Pray for. God cannot change. God cannot change them. Do you understand what I'm saying? We always get prayer requests just to pray for someone, right? So they can change their heart. But you know what? Let me tell you. God cannot change their heart at all. I'll give you more specific. Israel is a very small country. Okay? Israel is a very small country. And God tried to change their heart for thousands of years. Does God love Israel? Absolutely. Why can't he change? Maybe he should have snapped his finger, change your heart. How simple is that? God can do everything and anything. Why can't he do it? He said he loves us. Go ahead. Ding, believe me. Oh. So where did you see me in the Bible? We pray, please change their heart. Have you seen the prayer in the Bible? So, I'm telling you, this is a very common thing at church. So we do every day, right? Absolutely, we do pray for that, right? But what I'm saying is, this becoming a very, the faithful things that we as a church should do. But when you actually look at the Bible, that's not what is happening. That's not what you see. So why are we doing the things that we're doing? Because we believe, we think that's the faithful things to do. But according to the Bible, Jesus never prayed for Pharisees. Jesus did not go after them. Right? So this is something you have to learn. Just because we do it in church does not mean that's the faithful thing. I mean, when someone hears this preaching, and it's like, what are you teaching? Where do you see that? I don't see that in the Bible. Well, that's our hope, right? But when we pray, we expect God to answer, not what we're hoping. When we pray, we expect God to answer us, right? So what I'm saying is, we're praying for the things that it's not really the Bible teaches us. We're following the teachings of the church, which we believe it is the faithful things. We all believe it is the faithful things. So then the question is, then should we be praying for these people? So, when you look at the Bible, you won't find any prayers to tell God, change someone. One examples of it. I want you to turn to 1 King, chapter 11. 1 King, chapter 11. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughters of Pharaoh, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the people of Israel, You shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clung to these in love. He had 700 wives, who were princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For when Solomon was old, his wife turned away his heart after the other gods, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as he was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth and Goddess and Sidonians, and after Milcom, an abomination of Ammonites. So Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not wholly follow the Lord, as David his father had done. Then Solomon built the high places for Chemosh, an abomination of Moab, and for Molech, the abomination of Ammonites, on the mountain east of Jerusalem. And so he did all his foreign wives who made offering and sacrifice to their gods. And the Lord was angry with Solomon, because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice, and had commanded him concerning these things, that he should not go after other gods, but he did not keep what the Lord commanded. Therefore Lord said to Solomon, Since this has been your practice, and you have not kept my covenant and my statute, and I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you, and will give it to your servant. Yet for sake of David your father, I will not do it in your days, but I will tear it out of the hand of your sons. However, I will not tear away all the kingdom, but I will give one tribe to your son, for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem that I have chosen. And the Lord raised up an adversary against Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was of the royal house of Edom. For when David was in Edom, and Joab, the commander of the army, went up to bury the slain, he struck down every male of Edom. For Joab and all Israel remained there 6 months, until he had cut off every male in Edom. But Hadad fled to Egypt together with certain Edomites of his father's servants. Hadad, still being a little child, they set out from Midian and came to Paran, and took men with them from Paran, and came to Egypt, to Pharaoh king of Egypt, who gave him a house assigned him an allowance of food, and gave him the land. And Hadad found a great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so that he gave him in marriage the sister of his own wife, the sister of Taphanes, and the queen. And the sister of Taphanes bore him Gunabath, his son, from Taphanes, warned the Pharaoh's house, and Genubath was the Pharaoh's house among the sons of Pharaoh. But when Hadad heard Egypt that David slept with his father and and that Joab and the commander of the army was dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me depart, that I may go to my own country." But Pharaoh said to him, "What have you lacked with me, that you are now seeking to go to your own country?" And he said to him, "Only let me depart." God also raised up as an adversary to him Rezin, the son of Elidah, who had fled from his master Hadadezer from the Zobah. And he gathered men about him and became leader of marauding band after the killing of David. And they went to Damascus and lived there and made him king of Damascus. He was an adversary of Israel all the days of Solomon's, doing harm as Hadad did, and he loathed Israel and reigned over Syria. So, I'll give you some examples here. God loved Solomon. Solomon followed God when he was young. But later on, after he married to a lot of the foreign wives and concubines, and who drove him to change his heart? His wives changed his heart. Right? Not God changed his heart, but his wives changed his heart to follow other gods. So what did God do? Correct. He sent the adversary, and he appeared to him and warned him to follow me. He didn't change Solomon's heart. He could not change Solomon's heart. Although he loved him, God could not change Solomon's heart. Women, the wives and concubine of Solomon, could change his heart, but God could not change his heart. But what God could do is warn him and sent the adversary so that he changed his heart. That's best he could do. This is why God sent us, and after we are saved, why are we still living in this place? What are we doing here after we're saved? Our goal is to be in heaven. So after he saved us, after we believe, why shouldn't we go directly to heaven then? We need to do the work. We have to change the people. Not God could change them, but we can. But how does God actually warns us now? Does he speak to us? You're not following me? You should follow me. Is that how he actually warns us? No. We have the Word. Through the Holy Spirit touches our heart. It is not God who changes us. But here's we can pray. Instead of, "Lord, change my friends, my family, my sons, my father and my mother, my wife and husband," to change their heart. But rather, what you can do is, "Lord, prepare a good meetings with people who can give them warm feelings about God. Lord, I want dear friends, dear teachers, dear advisors or mentors. Please meet with them, good people. So through them, they can change their heart." Or we can say, "Lord, bring some adversary so they can actually realize that God is upon them, and it is something that God is warning them so they can turn their heart away from what they're doing and come back to the Lord." That's something we can pray. Let me tell you, this is exactly what happened to my pastor a long time ago. Not this pastor that I know, but the pastor that I used to go to church. And when he was young, when he was in his 20s, he encountered the Lord so strongly, and he just met the Lord like it is hard. He was crying all the days, and he was so joyful all the days, and then he was so passionate about Jesus, right? He just reading the scriptures, learning about it when he was young. But his father was doing business, and because of he's got a lot of money and his business was doing well, his father was not following God. So he turned away from God. So just by, as a son, watching his father, walking away from God, it was so painful watching him. Everything was going well for a family. It was, his father was bringing a lot of money into the house, and then everyone was living well life. But for him, living well life, it is not what he was driving. It's not what he was living for. So one day he prayed to God and said, Lord, please take away everything from him, Lord. He literally prayed, God, please take away everything from him. So that he can come back to you, Lord. And then, literally, his father's business bankrupt. Literally, his business was bankrupt. and then he came back to the Lord. So the thing is, for him, more important is for his father to be saved, rather than living in a rich life and then abandoning God. So, adversity or disaster may come upon you, or come up upon their people, right? They may just lost their job and they're living in a so difficult life. Sometimes I do pray for that. So God brings adversity to them so they know they need to come back. But are they always coming back? Not really. They may not come back at all. But this is something we can pray for, instead of, God, please change their heart, which does not work. And when God hears that prayer, this is, I think, what God's going to say. You want them to be changed? I want them to be changed more than you do. Doesn't he? Yeah, this is not something that God can do. It is only you can change. You're the only one who can make that decision to come back to the Lord. It is not God who can change your heart. You have to exercise your own free will to choose the Lord. It is you. Make that choice. So you get the idea. So today we just did the very introductions of numbers. We didn't get too far into it, but you have to learn all this as a basic. And what's really important is, what are we believing and what are we praying? Are we doing the things that the Bible said, or are we just doing the things that we think it is right? So let's follow what we are learning from the Scripture. Even though a lot of things that we have followed, because the church traditions teaches us that, church tradition is not the truth. This is why we need to know the Word and the Scriptures. We go by the Scriptures, not by what we are learned from other places. I want your heart to turn around and follow the Lord. Rely on the Lord. we finish our first sessions of Numbers up to this point. Do you have any questions?